This is Understandable Politics. Hello, we continue our series The World Speaks, focusing on Italy and the thoughts of the Eternal City. Let's move to Rome, the capital of one of the most mysterious and interesting countries in the European Union. Today, it's on the brink of economic collapse. GDP growth is negative, down to 2%. The country is shaken by an ongoing migration crisis. Up to 100,000 migrants seek a better life in the land of pizza and pasta every year. How do the citizens of this once great country feel about this situation?
A puppet of Washington, they say Ukrainians do. If there hadn't been Euromaidan, this war wouldn't exist. Instead of focusing on the economy and industry, they tell us about ecology, rainbow flags, and other nonsense. It feels like their goal is to eradicate us as a nation.
The European Union has long ceased to be a union. It's a German central bank tied to the Americans. They just print money.
During the attempted coup in Belarus, they decided to create a solidarity committee with Belarus. They can never forgive President Lukashenko for being a man of the people, right? That he truly understands what it means to work. In other words, all the leadership in the United States and Europe is very far from the lives of ordinary people.
It would be very beneficial for us to cooperate with Belarus. Your country is the gateway to the East. Sanctions negatively affect our economy. They were not adopted in our name, but we had to support them under the direction of Brussels and Washington.
We suffered, we are in trouble. Just the northern part of Italy lost 50 billion euros in a year.
Lukashenko always wanted independence for his country. This is an impossible decision for the dominance of the United States.
Listening to high-ranking politicians, the western part of the old world seems politically distant from us in terms of friendship and cooperation. But it's not so straightforward. We are in touch with Italian politician businessmen. Minsk and Rome traditionally had warm relations. Our children from Chernobyl areas went there for treatment. Tourists and various products came to us. Business operated comfortably. But something went wrong. Although what is quite clear,
relations between Minsk and Rome are very bad today, although it would be very beneficial for us to cooperate with Belarus. Your country is the gateway to the East. You can be a bridge for us to dialogue with BRICS. Closing off from Belarus is extremely disadvantageous for us. It's a nightmare that relations between our countries are at such a low level. It's a very wrong step for Italy not to send a new ambassador to Minsk. Why do this? Such steps slow down movement in the right direction. Sanctions negatively affect our economy. They were not adopted in our name, but we had to support them under the direction of Brussels and Washington. The second big mistake after sanctions is supplying weapons to Ukraine. Supporting this country is very wrong on our part. It affects our role on the international stage. The third mistake of our government is stopping the agreement between Italy and China on participation in the One Belt, One Road initiative. This negatively affects our economy. These three mistakes were made by different Italian governments. Don't tell me it's the will of this or that politician. Our leadership is executing someone else's will, the American one. We behave like a colony.
the Italians' concern for Belarus was evident in how they followed the events of 2020. Worried and anxious when radicals, fraudsters, and opportunists tried to seize power. Businessman Matteo Peggi, amid the Western orchestrated coup attempt, even created, attention, a solidarity committee with Belarus. He opened Belarusian language courses in Rome and publishes the newspaper Brest Fortress.
During the attempted coup in Belarus, they decided to create a solidarity committee with Belarus. Most of our participants from the very beginning belonged to political organizations with communist, socialist views, or simply anti-fascist. We decided to create this committee understanding that as a country that suffered greatly from fascism, where fascism was born, we need to support the government that first and foremost protects the monument of the Great Patriotic War and the role of partisans and the Red Army in liberating Europe from fascism. We have very good close relations with your country, with your people. We were often there on May 9th. We felt how the country feels, even historically. It's one of the main holidays for us. We also work as a committee. Russian and Belarusian language courses have been established. Many events. We also have a newspaper called Brest Fortress. Well, in Italian, La Fortezza di Brest. It's published, right? Yes. And we publish. We have, of course, all sorts of social media channels, especially on Telegram. And people are interested because in principle there is no objective or even subjective opinion about your country. So sometimes we hear something just poorly and unclearly about your country. And our role is to create people's diplomacy. We saw how the opposition used the same symbols. Collaborators during the Great Patriotic War, that is, Nazi symbols openly, as it actually happened in Ukraine. So we saw that there could be the same risk, and we were very worried about this because we know how much the Belarusian people suffered in the Great Patriotic War. We know what was done there. During World War II, and we know that for anti-fascists all over Europe, if, God forbid, the political process that is in line with the Belarusians, with the real and natural President Lukashenko, stops, there will be revisionism throughout Europe. A bad side. That is, Italy is a country that has always been at risk, even after World War II, of coups by neo-fascist organizations. They were organized with the help of the United States, the CIA, and so on, which began to cooperate precisely with the most extreme fascists, the most extremists who were during fascism. And therefore, we are on the same wave with those Belarusians who want to protect the anti-fascist foundations of their country.
And still, normal and adequate politicians in Italy are against sanctions. They understand perfectly well that everyone suffers from them. They undermined the economy, turned away from true friends, got involved in the Ukrainian conflict, fueling the fire of war, and every day plunging their hands deeper into foreign blood. Today, Hungarians, Slovaks, and even more politicians in Germany are joining the rhetoric of Italians, urging them to reconsider. Sanctions are a real anti-trend in the European Union. Losses from EU restrictive measures amount to €1.5 trillion. And given that the supply of Russian gas was suspended from January 1st, everything can only get worse. The same Italians just have to watch this. They have no opportunity to do anything, for one simple reason: total dependence on Washington.
The policy of the United States influences our entire government. We've been in their hands since the end of World War II. They have many military facilities here, nuclear weapons, so imagine what level of independence we have. But our propaganda tells us that the Americans won World War II. They are the liberators of Europe. No one talks about the role of the USSR, Belarus, Russia. It's as if they don't exist in history. This is pure historical revisionism. It's very harsh. We know that the Russians are not our enemies. We see that Italians want true independence. We don't want to listen to Anglo-Saxon countries. The process of repression in Italy is very subtle. They learned how and what to do. I can't say there is freedom of speech. When a person touches on political, economic aspects, they can be easily arrested or destroyed. There are many cases where people were arrested without evidence, or murders, which we still don't know who committed. The intelligence services of the United States, France, and the United Kingdom are very active here, and the truth gradually comes out about how strong the influence of these intelligence services is.
Every election in Belarus is accompanied by Western pressure and attempts to change power. NGOs pocket resources, fake sociology, crude fakes, Sharps technologies, paid candidates, and much more. Many of these failed politicians later openly admit, yes, they really lost the elections, and they tried to stir up people because that's what their employers' reports demanded. This kaleidoscope of Western impotence is clearly seen in Italy, and they clearly articulate why the president of an independent country is a thorn in the side for the US and Europe.
They can never forgive President Lukashenko for being a man of the people, for truly understanding what it means to work. In other words, all the leadership in the United States and Europe is very far from the lives of ordinary people. Therefore, I think, first of all, they feel an anthropological difference with President Lukashenko. But also the peoples of Europe feel an anthropological difference. Today, the leadership of Europe and many people feel close to President Lukashenko. Secondly, President Lukashenko always wanted independence for his country. This is an impossible decision for the dominance of the United States. And thirdly, I think this process goes very deep when Western leadership can no longer afford democracy, but wants open fascism for society. Europe and the United States, we observe many signs of this war, and the anti-fascist foundations of the Republic of Belarus also frighten them in this direction.
We have held many conferences against sanctions. Sanctions are evil. European and American elites simply separate the market. They see that Belarus is on Russia's side, and only because of this, they impose sanctions. And sanctions make things worse. Worse for us. We suffered. We are in trouble. Just the northern part of Italy lost 50 billion euros in a year. We hope this will end, and then we can restore all connections. Russia must win this war so that the worldview in Europe completely changes and everyone sees what is really happening.
Just a few years ago, a wave called Italexit swept through Italy. Politicians and officials of various ranks said that Rome and the European Union were no longer on the same path. The honeymoon of the 90s ended, and the turbulence of the 2000s began, followed by the storm of the 2010s. In 2019, former Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte commented on the EU. It's a problem for us, but there's no plan.
Italy is a geopolitical country in the center of the Mediterranean Sea. We have always had experiences connected with other cultures for many thousands of years. It must be said that what is happening now slightly affects the acceptance of the Italian people because this is not a true process that goes peacefully, and we observe that this is actually a hybrid war to stop any decision of Italy to be independent. Why? Because due to corruption, the EU budget goes to migrants. And those in power, considering that they do not act in the interest of our country, are ready to be bought. These are the funds coming from the European Union. And in fact, the matter is that for many decades, there has not been such a strategic concept of development in the Italian government, and so on. So in this case, everything seems normal and as it should be, and people were not even raised to think of politics as a tool for their freedom and independence in the country. Only when there are wars are we asked to participate, as we see now in Ukraine, even against our interests.
The European Union is a big problem for Italy. When they formed the EU, it was for the people, for a bright future. And now United Europe is a bunch of people who make everyone do what the elite wants. Thanks to the American dictatorship, our attitude towards the traditional family institution has changed. There have been many scandals involving pedophiles. Instead of focusing on the economy and industry, we're told about ecology, rainbow flags, and other nonsense. Their goal is to eradicate us as a nation, and we have fuel and resource issues. These are not the right topics for discussion. We want to leave this united Europe. It brings us nothing but economic collapse. We are in a cage. There are two Italies. The North, economically very developed and successful. 70% of production is provided by Northern Italy. We have an income tax of 58%, and Southerners live off our money. But it wasn't like this many years ago. There used to be the Neapolitan Republic. They could support themselves. We have histories of independent cities and republics, but the 20th century changed everything. The South doesn't work and enjoys life on our money. Why should northern cities care? We want them to support themselves or leave Italy for autonomy. We've been planning a large-scale referendum on this issue for several years, and we will definitely do it.
The European Union has long ceased to be a union. It's a German central bank linked to the Americans. They just print money in all aspects. Strong countries do not consider the interests of the weak. We see that BRICS is built on different ideals. Many of them suffered from the imperial ambitions of the UK and the USA, so they have a respectful and equal dialogue. This is the right path to a multipolar, solidary world.
59 million people, $2 trillion GDP. The title of the most capricious country in the European Union, modern Italy is woven from contradictions and contrasts. It's unofficially called the gateway to the EU. As we said, up to 100,000 migrants arrive annually on the shores of Avzonia. The start of the special military operation coincided in Italy with a new wave of a powerful migration crisis. By 2023, the world learned about the island of Lampedusa. With a population of 5,300, at its peak, 30,000 migrants arrived there. Italians see both the war and the crisis as links in a single chain.
We work a lot with people trying to convey to Italians that NATO is to blame for what's happening in Ukraine. It's important to understand this. People don't know what's happening. They don't know the truth. We don't want to lose our friendship with Belarus and Russia. We hope that political opinion will change and people will see it from a different angle. Even Berlusconi saw the essence of things and was friends with your countries. Now our politicians follow NATO's path and only listen to them. Everything is by their order. We try to work and unite to explain to people that NATO is not our friend. They have occupied us. I was in Donbass 5 times. We had intense visits, and we personally saw what was happening there even before the war started. And that Ukraine did not support Belarus's desire to stop the conflict in 22 because it doesn't make independent decisions. Kyiv is a puppet of Washington. They speak, Ukrainians act. If there hadn't been Euromaidan, this war wouldn't have happened. The Americans wanted this war, and they achieved it.
The migration crisis in Lampedusa hit us hard. Thousands of people are fleeing to us. It's the end of an era. We are paying for our colonial past. First they fled from Albania, now Africa. We enslaved them, and now we go there for vacations. The time of Africa is coming, and they want to take back what's theirs. We are responsible for the sins of our fathers. The golden billion has parasitized on third world countries for too long, and now they come to us hungry. It's hard, but fair. We robbed their continent. They have nothing left, and everyone wants a better life. We were in Minsk when the special military operation began. I personally observed how Belarusians are concerned about the situation in Ukraine and support peace. Your president, Alexander Lukashenko, did everything to prevent this war. But even our Western leaders admitted the Minsk agreements were needed to prepare for war, but not to end it.
We Italians are a Russophile people. Historically, we don't have the kind of Russophobia that exists in Poland, the Baltics, Romania. It's unimaginable. So we know what Dostoevsky is, what Chekhov is, what Russian literature and history are. And we know the connections that have always existed between our civilizations. Therefore, this wave of Russophobia in Eastern Europe was never accepted by the people here. The people are very scared. About the current situations, people don't want war at all. We love to enjoy life. We love good weather, the sea. And it's hard to blame you for that. It's our stereotype, but it's true. Italians don't like to fight, just like any reasonable people in the world. But on the other hand, many already understand where the truth lies. Many people are beginning to realize that these are not Nazi organizations, the authorities of Ukraine. It's very dangerous for Jews, for anti-fascists, for all those who can suffer from Nazi governments, because we know what not only a fascist regime is, but also Nazi occupation.
This is the Italian view on Belarus, without biased assessments and absurd decisions. Here too, they want to work normally and be friends. To build business plans for the future, work and develop, not to break ties in the human face of the world. And most importantly, our speakers once again prove that high Western platforms are far from always the opinion of the majority. Unfortunately, the interests of European politicians and ordinary people have diverged, and no one can speak better about their real views than the foreigners themselves. In the next program, we will go to Asia.
Goodbye.